Hey, welcome back again to the season finale of Lost World War II Gold and Yamashitas Gold. And in this episode, they said it was a very explosive episode. But yeah, I mean, I'm watching it. I'm kind of laughing. But, you know, I was really excited. They did find a cave, and I really would like to know what was in that cave. So it was a cliffhanger. And hopefully next year they'll redo the show and find out what's actually in that cave. Because, you know, honestly, I'd like to see them find something. But they did say a few things about Yamashitas Gold and maps and everything that was very, very interesting. So let's just go back to the beginning. So they show that they found a back door. They found a cave, and so it was 5 days before that. So then they shot back down to the current time where they were, not the current time, but 5 days earlier where they were actually exploring for gold. And so they were trying to remove the back door. And so they're thinking about possibly just blowing it open. But they decided not to. So they said there was 175 maps. There were blue maps and red series maps. The red series went to the royal family. But I've never heard this before. Seriously, this is the first time I ever heard this. However, the red series would have been the ones that Ben Valmores had, because the prince gave him all the maps. So he would have had all the red series maps. The maps that Robert Curtis photographed, like I said previously in previous episodes, the maps that he photographed were white. And most of the maps that you get today are either fake maps or maps that Robert Curtis had photographed and they made reproductions of them, or there are maps of unknown locations. Because they were saying that there's probably upwards of 1,000 different locations where Japanese soldiers may have actually found gold, or they buried their own stash of gold which they looted they buried it in order to come back later, because Yamashita actually had an order for the Japanese soldiers that they were not allowed to loot anything. So this would be private stashes. And they actually said, ta-da, there is no map at all to this mountain. Which makes me wonder, because Grandpa said the Japanese came in 1941. They actually did not enter the country till December 7th, 1941. So they wouldn't have been burying gold. They probably would have been making a mountain strategic area in case the Americans try to attack from the east coast of the island. Because the Japanese actually attacked on the west coast of the island, and they moved eastward. And so, and then this is the funny part. They go and they meet a man in the American Veterans Cemetery. This is the largest cemetery in Southeast Asia of American soldiers that were buried there. And he doesn't want his name told. And he said he knew Robert Curtis. But what he said is the exact same thing I've been saying the last 6 weeks. He's saying that Marcos hired him. There was 175 maps. Robert Curtis actually burnt the maps. General Ver took him to the cemetery. That was actually on July 4th. This story was actually, I read the story in Reader's Digest. Everything this guy has said, you can find on the internet. Everything this guy has said, I have in my book. Everything this guy said, I've said about 90% of it in previous episodes. This guy gave nothing, absolutely nothing new. I would love to hear about Santa Romana here. How did Santa Romana get $600 million cash and $1 billion worth of gold? My gut instinct is the CIA and the military actually were taking the gold as they reconquered the island and they found the locations. That's what I'm thinking. Marcos may have found a few in the 1960s, but next week I'm going to talk to you about Marcos's millions and how he really got the vast majority of his millions. And you're going to be a little bit on the surprise side. And he said it was stolen from China. This makes absolutely no sense at all. Robert Curtis did say that he saw some gold in Corregidor in Marcos's office that had Chinese writing on it. There is a rumor that Marcos is part Chinese, and he may have found some gold. Japanese may have taken the gold from Singapore and was bringing it into Manila in order to transport it up to Japan. That may have been true there. But to remove it from China and bring it down to the Philippines would make no sense, since if the Japanese would go like 600-700 miles north, then they could get it on a ship and then they could probably just flat out ship it to Japan. There is a conspiracy in Japan called the Cult of Gold, and I'll get into that in another episode. And he said it probably goes in the trillions. There is two Australian guys, and I'll get into this in the next episode. Two Australian guys who claim that they actually brokered gold for Marcos for $1 trillion. So there is some evidence that this may be true here. He says his life has been threatened 8 to 10 times. My life's been threatened 8 to 10 times there, but it was over women. So when you're talking about looking for gold in the Philippines, you have to be very careful. Landowners get jealous. Rivals get jealous. Government officials get jealous. Yes, you're going to be threatened. You better watch your back. They move the back door and they find no tunnel. So they start, and then the code expert, I love this guy. He says, I've never seen signs and symbols like this anywhere else. Well, I can tell you one thing he's never ever seen before, and that's Yamashitas gold. If he's been looking for 20 years, he's never found a thing. How do you know he's accurate? Jeez. So they use electrical detecting, and they said about 40, there's a void about 40 to 20 feet down. Like I said, the Philippines is part of the Ring of Fire. There's a lot of volcanic activity, so there's going to be a lot of voids into the ground in the Philippines. It's a volcanic island nation. If you go from Manila to Angeles City, there are 2 volcanoes, I believe, on your right-hand side, maybe 3. I know there's 2 on the right-hand side, and then when you get to Angeles City, there's a 3rd one. So just in that area alone are 3 volcanoes. If you look in Baguio, Baguio is a mountainous area, so it could have a lot of voids in it. It could have tunnels. But when Roger Rojas found his stash of gold, it actually had railroad tracks in it. So the Japanese were easily to put the gold into the cave, and then they blew it up. There was 2 other men with Roger Rojas when he found the gold. One actually was in the cave as a child, and he knew kind of the precise location. But the 3rd was a son of a Japanese soldier who had a map, and he knew where to go. So the 3 of them together were able to find the stash. It was not part of the Yamashita gold. It was a separate map because, like I said, Robert Curtis had all the maps. Marcos had all the maps. Benvel Morris had all the maps. So next year, I'm hoping that they research Benvel Morris. They talk to Sterling Seagrave, and they talk to me, but talk about Santa Romana. Look into Santa Romana. This will be one of the biggest keys. I think he worked for the CIA. Will probably work for the military. Rumors has he dove for gold in Japan, in Tokyo Bay, looking for gold that was thrown overboard. The U.S. military the U.S. government wanted $1 billion from Japan to pay for war reparations. And this could have been part of the $1 billion that the Japanese probably were going to pay. And they probably gave up where the gold locations were to the military. And so the CIA actually took it. There are stories in Thailand about 6 boxcars full of gold that are buried into the ground. Only 1 boxcar has been found, and it was empty. But many people don't believe it's true. Now in Vietnam, they're starting to think that Japanese buried gold throughout the country. I know there was a military man I met. He said during the Vietnamese War, he did stumble across several tons of gold in the middle of the jungle. And he said he didn't want to take it because he didn't want to carry around 20, 30, 40 pounds of gold and already being wet, and just didn't want to take it. So he didn't. So I do believe there was some gold. There was a lot of gold in Europe. Reportedly, it was returned. I'm probably thinking about half of it was returned, and the U.S. military took the other half because the United States has the largest deposit of gold in the world. I think it has twice as much as any other nation in the world. The leader goes, "This treasure's been waiting for me my whole life." I don't think there's any more treasure to be found in the Philippines. If there is, I want to see it because no gold has been found in 42 years, or 48 years. Roger Rojas was the last person to find anything 48 years ago. And so they said, go to a flat place. It's a triangle. And they said the Japanese cut a road through the LiDAR. It really doesn't show up, but they said, oh, over here. And they find a tunnel. And so it was man-made. They found a sledgehammer in it. And he goes, oh, the handle rotted off. Well, how'd the handle rot off if, say, the wood on the top and the bottom, the sides and everything, didn't rot off? Sometimes when you're using a sledgehammer, you do break it. So the handle does come off. And so it's really a nice tunnel and everything. And so what they do is they threw in some smoke bombs, they covered it up, and they found 4 or 5 locations where there were exits. But I'd love to see what's inside this tunnel. And on a sad note, Grandpa passed away right after they found the tunnel. And my condolences go out to the family. And so next week, I'm going to show you how Marcos made a lot of his money. And when he left the Philippines, he had $300 million worth of gold options, bearer bonds, which means he owned $300 million worth of gold without his signature on it. So really, it belonged to him when he signed it, but if he lost it, somebody stole it, someone else could sign it, and they could take it. So a bearer bond is a bond that says you own it, but there's no signature or name on it. So it's basically anybody could steal it, but their name on it can have it. And when he came to the United States, I'm not sure if this is the same one, but he had $300 million worth of gold bonds when he came to the United States. And the United States government confiscated it. But there are stories that General Ver actually took gold out of the country. They found tons of gold in Switzerland, in vaults. They found gold deposits in Hong Kong. There were, I think, 6 or 7 bank accounts on. I'll give you the exact same numbers next week. And so that was the end of the show there. And I hope next year they actually start looking at the conspiracy theories and everything, because it is going to be something that really, really interesting when you start to see the CIA and the military involvement. But Santa Romana and Ben Valmores are the 2 people that you really, really want to know about. And then you want to talk about the Prince Chichibu and the other 2 princes that were supposedly, reportedly in the Philippines, and find out more about them. So if they could talk to Ben Valmores' family, they could talk to other members of the Libra group. Olaf Johansson said they found 1,250 tons of gold. 1,250 tons of gold, which would have been equal to about 1 or 2% of the world's gold. We'll talk about that next week and talk about a few other things Imelda said and going on to that. So thank you all and see you next week.